So this is going to be a two-part video, and by the end of watching both videos you'll be able to basically model any hard surface object that you want with no knowledge of how topology works. So you won't need to worry about the edge flow or the direction of polygons or getting nice smoothing. You'll basically be able to create anything you want very easily. So we're going to be looking at how we can overcome one of the biggest problems when 3D modeling using a boolean workflow. So let me just hide this and I'll come out of cycles mode. Let's hide that. So this is the problem. If I take a cube, let's just turn on overlays, I want to be able to boolean this and also create a nice bevel. So if I bring that to about here, shift click, control minus, I'm using the Bool Tools add-on, by the way, that comes with Blender. Basically it just sets up your modifiers for you. So normally if you wanted to create a bevel now, you would click on the bevel modifier or apply it and go into edit mode and do it manually. But you would basically use the bevel modifier. You would turn down the offset to a number like this, maybe give it a few segments, and we'll limit it to the angle so that it's only affecting this part. And the issue is, if I want to take this bevel wider than the surrounding geometry, I can't do it. If you watch what happens, basically that's it. The model is broken as soon as that bevel is wider than the surrounding topology allows. So that basically limits us to how we can model with a Boolean workflow. And to get around this, I'm going to introduce you to a free add-on, and the add-on is called Bevel After Boolean, and let's take a look at that. So the first thing to do is to get the add-on, which is linked to in the description. So if you click on that link, it will take you to this website. It's by somebody called Rodinkov Ilya, or Leah. And if you scroll down a little bit, then you've got all the latest versions. So just get the latest one, currently 0300 at the time of recording. So install the add-on as you would any other add-on in Blender, just going into Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and then Install, and then just choose the location you've installed it, you've downloaded it to, and then enable it in here. And when you've done that, it'll appear over here, as I mentioned, in the tab. So let's start with this cube that we had problems with previously. So I'll delete the bevel modifier, and we're back to where we were just after the boolean. And now what I'll do is I'll click on this cube and I'll click on the bevel option, and you'll see we've immediately got a nice bevel, just the same as we did previously. But the difference is with this add-on is that we can now go beyond the surrounding topology without getting those artifacts. So if I just increase this bevel radius, just keep an eye on what happens on the model when it gets past that edge, you can see it's actually rebuilding the model and the surrounding topology, so that we're not limited now to the width of the bevel. Within reason. If we go too high, then we will get problems. For example, if I take this very high, I mean we're getting ridiculously high there already, but eventually that will happen. So if you see that, basically you've got it way too high. But I'll turn that back down to I think 0.2 maybe. And you can push it, quite some decent extremes, and you're still not going to get any shading artifacts. So look how smooth that is. Really good result. So let's go through the settings quickly, just so you can know how to fix problems when they appear. So let me just turn this back to 0.01. Gives us a sharp. In fact, now let's change it to 0.1. So first things then, you've got the wire option, and that turns on the wire. I prefer not to use that because enabling it does require it to recalculate everything. So instead, I'll use the wireframe option in Blender itself, and then I can just turn it on or off up here. Second option is curve, and that creates a pipe, which you can then use for whatever you want. You've also got the option to stop calculation so that you can change options quickly without having to wait for it to recalculate. You've got the slice option. This is an interesting one because it'll create a panel, which is often very useful in 3D modeling. So that creates a nice panel like that. You've got the option to change the operation, so you don't have to just do a difference. You could do let's go around this side. You could do a union, and that will create a union between the two objects and update the bevel. And you've also got the option for an intersection, which will create an intersection and also the bevel. So that's that. I'll put that back to difference. We can change the radius, as we've already seen. We can change the number of subsurface divisions to use. That's if the objects you're using have got a subsurface modifier applied. You can choose how many levels to use for the operation. You've got the bevel profile, which is the same as you would normally get in any bevel modifier. Just allows you to change the profile of the bevel. So if I change it to 1, then it'll be like a 90 degree. If I change it to 0, then it'll be like a 90 degree in the opposite direction. If you want to get rid of this little chamfer, just change the bevel segments to a odd number, and that'll make that a complete 90 degree angle. I'll change that back to 0.5 for the bevel. So yeah, bevel segments is the number of segments in this direction, and then you've got the corner profile, fixed outside corner, corner size, and absolute size options. And these are basically just to try and fix any problems you get if you've got a sharp angle on one of the objects that you've used to cut into the object. And it will try and fix that sharp corner to get rid of any geometry problems. Transfer normals is an important one. It takes the normals from both of the objects that you use to create the boolean, and it transfers those normals onto the new object, so that you don't get any smoothing artifacts. So that's very important. I would suggest to always keep that turned on. Smooth patch will allow you to smooth out any areas of just the bevel. Smooth factor is just a multiplier for smooth patch. Remove doubles gets rid of any, it merges any vertices that are within a set distance from each other that you set in here. Subdivide patch will give it more geometry lengthways, so if I change that to 0, you can see we've got less geometry now along the length of the patch. So I'll try and change that up to maybe until it's smooth, so probably about 2. You can take it higher if you want, maybe 4, and that'll give you a really smooth corner there. It's a good idea really to try and match it up with how many you've got here, so that you've got a sort of a very similar curve on the patch and the sort of boolean original geometry. You've got the option to simplify it by angle. So this is similar to remove doubles, but whereas remove doubles does it based on distance, this will do it based on angle. So if you've got polygons that have got an angle between them of less than what you put in here, it will make them into one polygon. So let's change that to 10, and then you can see that would have had an edge there, but because the angle was below 10 degrees, it's got rid of that edge and it's sort of one big face now. And you've got the, turn that off, you've got the refine options, which will more evenly distribute the geometry around the length of the patch. And that's useful because if you create more booleans, the outside of the face that you're cutting into, the more vertices you've got, the better the result, because there's more vertices to latch onto from the new object that you cut in. So if you can, try and keep that turned on. Multiply will basically do the same as subdivide patch. Shift will slide the patch around on itself, and that's useful for situations where you might have problems with the surrounding topology, and sliding that around will give the algorithm a chance to sort of find a better topology and make new connections and hopefully get rid of any problems. So I'll just show you that by turning on the curve option up here. So if I slide this around, so if I use the shift, I'm just moving that, you can see it's actually moving around on itself like that, and then it will be recalculating any connections of the topology surrounding that. So let's just turn that back to 0. Okay, and let's turn that off as well. The accuracy, although I can't find any documentation on it, presumably it tells the algorithm how many iterations to use to try and find the best solution for the topology. Personally, I've been leaving it down at sort of 4 instead of 64, with the hopes that that will be increasing the speed of the add-on slightly. But if anybody knows differently regarding that, let me know in the comments below. The pipe setting, so the pipe again is basically the curve, and what you can do with the pipe settings, you can increase the number of segments. Presumably this is just a setting for if you're planning to use just the pipe, and you can also tilt it. So if I tilt this now, you'll see it's twisting around on itself, and if I turn the curve off, and if you watch the geometry now, as I tilt this around, it will actually try and rebuild the surrounding geometry. Let's try up here, see if we can see a difference. Yeah, you can, very slight, but it's trying to recalculate. So that's another thing you can try and tweak if you've got small problems with surrounding topology. And the last thing is the pipe twist smooth does what it says on the tin. Basically, it will smooth out any twists in the pipe to try and resolve any issues. So that's how you that's a basic overview of the options. And what we're going to do now is actually build the model that I showed you earlier, so that we can get an idea of where we would use these and to fix problems that we run into, so that you can actually get a better understanding of what I've just explained. So let's move on to the next section.